My sister shoved my suitcase off her porch like it was a bag of garbage. She laughed and told me to learn my place before slamming the door in my face, while my husband stood right behind her and said nothing. They thought I owned nothing but an old phone and cheap clothes. But that night, I opened a digital file that my sister had no idea even existed. My name is Brianna Roberts. If you looked at me, you would see a woman fading into the beige background of middle age. I wore a cotton blend sweater that had been washed enough times to lose its original sheen, and my shoes were practical, flat-soled things designed for walking, not for making an entrance. I drove a sedan that was 6 years old and had a dent on the rear bumper from a shopping cart incident I never bothered to fix, to the world, and specifically to my older sister Marla. I was a failure. I was the cautionary tale. I was the poor relation who had never quite figured out how to grab the brass ring of the American dream. Marla, on the other hand, was the golden standard, or so she believed. We were sitting in the dining room of her expansive estate in Scottsdale, Arizona. The house was a testament to new money and old insecurities. It was all white marble, glass railings, and air conditioning set to a temperature that required guests to wear jackets in the middle of July. Outside, the desert heat was still radiating off the pavement at 9 o'clock at night, but inside, it was sterile and cold. Dinner had been an exercise in endurance. Marla sat at the head of the table, picking at a salad that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She wore a silk blouse that shimmered under the chandelier's aggressive light. Every time she moved, the heavy gold bracelets on her wrist clattered, a constant auditory reminder of her net worth. "I just do not understand why you cannot find something more suitable, Brianna," Marla said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She gestured with her fork towards me. "Derek tells me you are still looking for administrative work. At your age, it is embarrassing." I carefully cut a piece of the dry chicken breast on my plate. I did not look up. "I prefer simple work, Marla. It gives me time to think." "Think," Marla laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Thinking does not pay the mortgage, Brianna. Oh, wait, you do not have a mortgage, because you are staying here, in my guest wing, for free." I felt the eyes of the other guests, a couple of Marla's socialite friends, drilling into me. They smirked, enjoying the blood sport. This was Marla's favorite pastime, inviting an audience to witness her benevolence towards her charity case of a sister. "We appreciate the hospitality, Marla," I said quietly. I looked to my right. Derek was sitting there, nursing a glass of expensive scotch. My husband of 10 years. He was handsome in a soft, pliable way. He liked nice things, and lately, he had been liking Marla's nice things a little too much. Right. Derek did not meet my eyes. He stared into the amber liquid in his glass. "It is a nice house, Brianna. You should be more grateful." The air in the room shifted. It became heavier. That was not the answer of a partner. That was the answer of a subordinate. Marla smiled. Sensing blood in the water, she leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. "See, even your husband knows it. You are a leech, Brianna. I have let you stay here for 3 weeks while you sort your life out. But frankly, I am tired of seeing your cheap car in my driveway. It ruins the aesthetic." I placed my fork down. The metal made a soft click against the china. "Are you asking us to leave, Marla?" "I am not asking," she sneered. She stood up, throwing her napkin onto the table. "I am telling you, get out, tonight. I have an interior designer coming tomorrow morning to redo the guest wing, and I do not want your clutter in the way." "It is 9:30 at night," I stated calmly. "So," Marla waved her hand dismissively, "go find a motel, if you can afford one." I looked at Derek again. I expected him to stand up. I expected him to say that this was unreasonable, that we were family, that you do not kick people out into the Arizona heat in the middle of the night without notice. Derek slowly pushed his chair back. He stood up. He walked around the table, and he went to stand next to Marla. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weak chin, the greedy eyes, the way he subtly leaned into Marla's sphere of influence, like a plant seeking the sun. "Derek," I asked. My voice did not shake. "She is right, Brianna," Derek said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "You have been dragging us down for years. I am tired of the budgeting. I am tired of the coupons. Marla offers a different kind of life. You are staying." "I am home," Derek said. He put a hand on Marla's shoulder. Marla preened like a cat. "You heard him," Marla spat. "He stays. You go, now, before I call security." I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not beg. The rage I felt was not a fire. It was a glacier. Massive and cold and crushing. I stood up, smoothed the front of my sweater, and looked Marla dead in the eye. "Okay," I said. Marla blinked, disappointed. She wanted a scene. She wanted tears. She wanted me to kneel so she could kick me. "Okay," she repeated. "That is it. You have no pride." "I have plenty of pride," I said softly. "That is why I am leaving." I turned and walked out of the dining room. I could hear their whispers behind me, the triumphant giggles of Marla's friends. I went to the guest wing. I did not have much. I packed my clothes into my single battered suitcase. I took my toiletries. I took the framed photo of our parents that Marla had thrown in the trash years ago. When I dragged my suitcase to the front door 5 minutes later, Marla and Derek were waiting. Marla held the door open, not to be polite, but to ensure I left fast enough. "Do not come back until you have a bank account that has more than 3 digits." Marla laughed. I stopped on the threshold. I looked at Derek one last time. He was avoiding my gaze, focusing intently on the heavy oak door. "Derek," I said. He flinched. "Make sure this is what you want." "Just go, Brianna," he muttered. He reached out and grabbed the edge of the door, his hand brushing against Marla's. "Let's close this. Marla, keep the cool air in." "Goodbye, Brianna," Marla said, her smile wide and predatory. "Try not to look too homeless." "Thank you," I said. "For what?" Marla scoffed. "For making it clear." Derek shoved the door. It slammed shut with a heavy, final thud. I heard the distinct click of the deadbolt sliding home immediately after. I stood there for a moment on the oversized porch. The night air was dry and hot, smelling of sagebrush and expensive irrigation systems. I was alone. I dragged my suitcase down the pristine stone steps, the wheels clattering loudly in the quiet neighborhood. I reached my car, the silver Honda that Marla hated so much. I popped the trunk and heaved my suitcase inside. My arms trembled slightly, not from the weight, but from the adrenaline dumping into my system. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The interior of the car was stiflingly hot. I did not start the engine immediately. I took out my phone. My hands were steady now, cold. I opened our banking app, the joint account Derek and I had shared for 10 years, the account where my modest salary and his commissions went. I stared at the screen. Available balance $0.00. I tapped on the transaction history. It was a massacre. 48 hours ago, there had been a transfer, $35,000, then another for $12,000, then a final sweep of the remaining $400.82, all transferred to an external account labeled simply DM Fund, Derek and Marla. They had not just kicked me out. They had planned this. They had waited until the money was moved, until the checks had cleared, and then they had staged the dinner to discard me. Derek had been smiling at me this morning over coffee, knowing he had already stolen every dime I had access to. A normal woman would have panicked. A normal woman would be pounding on the door, screaming for her money. A normal woman would call the police, only to be told it is a civil matter between spouses. I was not a normal woman. I placed the phone on the passenger seat. I reached into the back seat and pulled over my laptop bag. It was an old, fraying canvas messenger bag. I pulled out the laptop. It was a heavy black brick of a machine, thick and unappealing. To the casual observer, it looked like something a high school student would have used 10 years ago. I opened it. The screen flickered to life. It did not run Windows or Mac OS. It ran a custom Linux kernel I had built myself. The fan whirred softly. The only sound in the car besides my own breathing. I typed in a 64-character password. The screen went black for a second. Then a terminal window opened. Green text scrolled rapidly down the screen, connecting through 3 different proxy servers, bouncing my signal from Dallas to Zurich to Singapore and back to a secure server farm in Northern Virginia. A final window popped up. It was stark, simple, and terrifyingly powerful. Monroe Holdings. Voting trust. Status active. Identity verified. Brianna Marie Roberts. Controlling interest 51%. I looked at the house. I could see the silhouette of Marla and Derek in the living room window. They were probably toasting with champagne, laughing at the poor sister driving away in her dented car with nothing to her name. They thought they had taken everything. They thought money was the only form of power. I typed a command to check the integrity of the trust. It was solid, ironclad. My father had set it up before he died. Disgusted by Marla's greed and lack of vision, he had left the houses and the cash to Marla because that was all she understood. But the company, the Monroe Sentinel Technologies infrastructure that ran security for half the Fortune 500 companies, he had left the controlling voting rights to me, but he had made me promise to wait. Wait until she shows you who she really is. He had written in his final letter, when she pushes you out, that is when you walk back in. She had pushed. I looked at the glowing screen. I had access to everything, not just the board votes, but the deep-level system architecture. I could see the board meeting schedules. I could see the executive payroll. And then I saw something else. A notification blinking in the corner of my secure dashboard. Alert emergency board packet generated. Access restricted. I frowned. An emergency board packet. Marla was on the board, but she was a figurehead. She didn't generate packets. I executed a bypass script. It took 3 seconds. The file opened. It was a draft proposal for a sale of the entire company to a foreign conglomerate. The date for the vote was set for next week. I sat back in my seat, the sweat on my back turning cold. They were trying to sell my father's legacy. They were trying to cash out. Marla did not just want to be rich. She wanted to liquidate the empire to fund her lifestyle forever. And Derek had probably found out and decided to switch sides for a cut of the payout. They needed a unanimous vote from the Class A shareholders. They thought Marla held the proxy for the family trust. They thought I was just a silent beneficiary with no power. I closed the laptop gently. I started the car. The engine coughed once before turning over. I put it in reverse and backed out of the driveway. As I drove down the street, passing the manicured lawns and the 6-car garages, I did not feel poor. I felt like a hunter who had just found the trail. "Thank you, Marla," I whispered to the empty car. "You just gave me permission to stop pretending." I turned onto the main road, heading towards the highway. I had $0 in my bank account. I had a husband who had stolen my dignity. I had a sister who treated me like trash. But as I merged onto the interstate, heading west, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. I owned 51% of the company they were trying to sell. And tomorrow, I was going to remind them that the person who holds the keys does not need to knock. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel in Tempe buzzed with a sound that was dangerously close to the hum of an electrical short. It was 11:45 at night. I paid $65 cash for a room that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and decades of stale cigarette smoke. The clerk, a man with more tattoos than teeth, did not ask for identification when I slid the bills across the counter. That was the only luxury I could afford right now, anonymity. I locked the door behind me and engaged the deadbolt. I checked the window latch. It was loose, so I jammed a wooden chair under the doorknob. Basic physical security. Now, I needed to secure the digital perimeter. I set up my workspace on the small, scarred round table in the corner. My laptop was already running. I did not connect to the motel's Wi-Fi. That was rule number 1 of digital hygiene. Never trust a public network. I tethered my connection through a secure cellular dongle with a randomized MAC address. First, I had to stop the bleeding. I logged into my email provider. My fingers flew across the keys. I did not just change the password. I revoked all active sessions. I set up a new two-factor authentication key generator on my laptop, bypassing my phone entirely. If Derek or Marla tried to reset the password via SMS, they would hit a brick wall. Next, the bank. The balance was still zero. Looking at the empty number caused a physical pang in my chest, a hollow thud. But I pushed it aside. I was not here to mourn the money. I was here to track it. I navigated to the security tab of the banking portal. Most people look at the transaction history. I looked at the access logs. Banks keep detailed records of every login attempt time, IP address, device type, and session duration. I scrolled back 48 hours. There it was. Successful login. Tuesday, 3:12 in the morning. I remembered that night. Derek had been sleeping next to me, or so I thought. I had woken up around 3:30 to get water, and he was in bed, breathing deeply. He must have done it while I was in REM sleep, lying inches away from me. I expanded the metadata for that login. Device iPhone 15 Pro Max, OS version 17.3. Derek used a 3-year-old Android. He refused to switch ecosystems. I used an older model iPhone, but not a Pro Max. Marla, however, upgraded her phone every September like clockwork. I copied the IP address 68.104.221.9. I opened a terminal window and ran a traceroute. The signal hopped from the bank's server to a local ISP node in Scottsdale. I cross-referenced the geolocation with a map. The signal originated from a residential block in Silverleaf. It was Marla's house. Derek had not just transferred the money, he had used Marla's phone to do it, or a device connected to her home Wi-Fi. He was not at home at 3:12 in the morning. He was with her. I sat back, the cheap motel chair creaking. If he was at her house at 3 in the morning while I was asleep, he had physically left our bed, driven 20 minutes to her house, done the deed, and driven back before I woke up. Unless he didn't leave. I opened a new tab. I navigated to the cloud storage service for our home security system. The cameras were old, a distinct doorbell brand that I had installed 5 years ago. The subscription was under my maiden name, Roberts, tied to an email address Derek rarely checked. I logged in, the dashboard loaded. I went to the timeline for Tuesday morning, 2:45 in the morning. The video feed was grainy in the night vision mode. The front door of our rental house opened. Derek walked out. He was dressed in jeans and a hoodie. He did not look like a man sneaking out to have an affair. He looked like a man going to work. He moved with purpose. He got into his car and drove off. I scrubbed forward. 3:55 in the morning, his car returned. He walked back into the house, locking the door behind him. He had been gone for exactly 70 minutes. But that was not the smoking gun. I needed to see what happened on the other end. I had access to Marla's security system too. She had forgotten her password 2 years ago during a crisis involving a lost package, and she had demanded I fix it. I had, and I had kept a backdoor administrative account for maintenance. She never changed the default settings because she assumed technology just worked by magic. I accessed the feed for Marla's front gate. Tuesday, 3:05 in the morning. Derek's car pulled up. The gate opened automatically. He had the code. He did not park in the driveway. He pulled around the back, into the garage, out of sight of the street. 10 minutes later, at 3:15, the camera in Marla's kitchen triggered a motion event. I clicked play. The kitchen was lit by the under-cabinet lighting. Marla was wearing a silk robe, leaning against the marble island, holding a glass of wine. Derek walked into the frame. He did not hug her. They did not kiss. This was not a romantic tryst. Marla handed him her phone. Derek took it, tapped the screen for a few minutes, the exact time the money left my account, and then handed it back. Marla laughed. I could not hear the audio clearly, but I saw her throw her head back. Derek smiled a tight, relieved smile. He took the wine glass from her hand, took a sip, and set it down. Then he shook her hand. They shook hands, like business partners concluding a merger. I froze the frame. That handshake was more damning than any infidelity. It was a contract. They had conspired to bankrupt me. I closed the video window. My hands were cold. I needed to hear him. I needed to match the man in the video with the man who claimed to love me. I picked up my phone and went to my voicemail archive. I found a deleted message from Monday afternoon, the day before the theft. I held the phone to my ear. "Hey, honey," Derek's voice played, smooth and warm. "Just checking in. I was thinking about picking up that Thai food you like for dinner. Maybe we can watch a movie. I love you. Bye." I replayed it. "I love you." He had left that message 4 hours before he drove to my sister's house to ruin my life. The sweetness in his voice was a weapon. It was camouflage. He wanted me compliant and happy so I would not check the accounts until it was too late. I saved the voicemail file to my encrypted drive. Label Exhibit A. Manipulation. I returned to my laptop. I had the timeline. I had the method. Now I needed the motive. I knew they wanted to sell the company, but why destroy me personally? Why not just divorce me? I went to my email trash bin. I had already recovered my account, but I wanted to see what they had tried to delete. Hackers and thieves are often lazy. They hit delete, but rarely purge the server. There were dozens of emails from Derek, forwarded to himself, then deleted, tax returns, my social security information, but one subject line stood out. Subject FWD, Emergency Board Packet, Monroe Sentinel Technologies. It was dated 3 days ago, sent from Marla's corporate email to Derek, then deleted by Derek from my account. No. That made no sense. Derek did not have access to my secure work email. Wait, I looked at the header. It wasn't sent to me. It was a blind carbon copy, a BCC that had bounced back because of a server error, landing in a catch-all folder I monitored for system health. Marla had tried to send this to Wade Kessler, the acting CFO, and had accidentally included a distribution list that routed through my old admin filters. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF, heavily redacted. I ran a script to strip the black overlay. It was a clumsy redaction tool, merely a black layer placed over the text, not a true removal of data. I read the unredacted text. Proposition sale of Monroe Sentinel Technologies to Zephyr. Data Corp. Price $450 million. Contingency complete liquidation of all Class B assets and restructuring of the voting trust. My eyes narrowed. The voting trust. That was me. They couldn't restructure it without the trustee's signature. My signature. I scrolled to page 42. There was a clause highlighted in yellow. Clause 12.4. In the event of the incapacity, financial insolvency, or mental instability of the primary trustee, the voting rights shall revert to the secondary beneficiary, Marla Monroe. Financial insolvency. The puzzle pieces snapped together with a violent click. They did not just steal my money to be cruel. They stole it to trigger Clause 12.4. If I was destitute, if I had zero assets and no home, they could petition the board to declare me financially insolvent. They could argue I was unfit to manage a trust worth $500 million if I could not even manage my own checking account. Marla didn't just want me gone. She wanted to legally decapitate me so she could sell the company. Clever, I whispered. Evil, but clever. I was about to close the file when a notification popped up on my custom security dashboard. System alert, unauthorized access detected in Sector 4. Sector 4 was my deep storage, the digital vault where the original voting trust documents and my father's video will were kept. I sat up straighter. Had Marla found it, I pulled up the access log for the vault. There was a login attempt active right now. I watched the cursor move on the virtual map of my server. Whoever this was, they were good. They were not using a password. They were using a quantum-resistant encryption key. They were bypassing the firewalls like they were made of paper. I checked the source IP. It was not Scottsdale. It was not Phoenix. The signal was bouncing through a Tor node in Iceland, then a proxy in Singapore, finally terminating. Nowhere. It vanished. This was not Marla. Marla struggled to convert a Word document to a PDF. This was not Derek. Derek used password 1203 for his fantasy football league. This was a professional, a ghost. I watched as the intruder navigated the file structure. They did not touch the financial records. They did not touch the blackmail photos I had of the board members. They went straight for a folder I had created 10 years ago and never opened. Folder name Project Lattice. My breath caught in my throat. Project Lattice was a myth. It was a ghost story my father used to tell about a government contract that went sideways. It was supposed to be dead. The intruder copied the file. The transfer bar filled up in 3 seconds. Then, just as quickly as they appeared, they vanished. Session terminated. I stared at the screen. The fan on my laptop was spinning at maximum speed. Marla and Derek were playing checkers. They were moving pieces around a board, trying to steal a few $100,000 in a house. But someone else was playing chess. Someone else knew about the trust, knew about the server, and knew exactly where to look for a project that technically did not exist. I wasn't just fighting my sister and my husband anymore. I was in the middle of something much, much bigger. I picked up the lukewarm coffee from the motel nightstand and took a sip. It tasted like battery acid. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "You want to play?" I opened a new command line. I could not stop the intruder, they were already gone. But every digital footprint leaves a scent, no matter how clean the sweep. I typed a command, Initiate Protocol Hunter. If they wanted to find out who owned the company, they were about to get their answer. But first, I had to survive the week. I had to prove I wasn't insolvent. And I had to find out who the hell just walked through my digital front door without breaking the lock. The office of Mallory Vance was located on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Phoenix, a building that seemed designed to intimidate anyone who made less than 7 figures a year. I walked into the reception area wearing the same clothes I had left Marla's house in, though I had managed to wash them in the motel sink. The receptionist looked at my scuffed flat shoes and the fraying hem of my sweater with a polite, practiced disdain. She clearly thought I was delivering lunch, or perhaps there to clean the windows. "I have an appointment with Ms. Vance," I said, my voice steady. "Brianna Roberts." The receptionist tapped a manicured fingernail against her keyboard, her eyebrows raising slightly as the screen confirmed my claim. "Oh, Ms. Roberts, one moment." 2 minutes later, I was sitting across from Mallory. She was a woman of sharp angles and even sharper intellect, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than my car. She was one of the few people on Earth who knew the truth about the Monroe legacy. She had been my father's personal attorney, and now she was the custodian of the voting trust. "You look terrible, Brianna," Mallory said. She did not offer me coffee or sympathy. She offered me the truth. That was why I liked her. "I was evicted 48 hours ago," I replied, placing my hands on the mahogany desk. "And my assets were liquidated by my husband and sister. I am currently operating with 0 liquidity." Mallory leaned back, steepling her fingers. "I saw the alerts on the trust monitoring system. I assumed you were making a play." "You are telling me you are on the defensive." "For now," I said. "Marla is trying to trigger the insolvency clause, Clause 12.4. She thinks if I am homeless and broke, she can petition the board to strip me of my voting rights due to financial instability." Mallory nodded slowly. "It is a valid strategy. If you cannot maintain your own household, the bylaws argue you cannot be trusted with the controlling interest of a billion-dollar security firm. She needs you declared incompetent before the shareholder meeting." "She won't get the chance," I said. "I am taking a contract in Dallas." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "Dallas, the Cipher Group. They have been trying to recruit me for 3 years to audit their grid security. I accepted the offer this morning at 6. The signing bonus alone covers a year of rent. I am driving out tonight." "Good," Mallory said, making a note on her tablet. "That kills the insolvency argument. A high 6-figure contract proves financial viability. But Brianna, why are you letting them think they are winning? You could end this right now. 1 signature from you, and I walk into that boardroom and fire the lot of them." I looked out the window at the sprawling desert city below. "Because they aren't just incompetent. Mallory, they are criminals. If I fire them now, they walk away with golden parachutes and severance packages. Marla gets to keep the house. Derek gets half my assets in the divorce. They win." I turned back to her. "I don't want to fire them. I want to bury them, legally, irrevocably. I want to expose the theft, the corporate espionage, and the fraud. I want them to leave that company in handcuffs, not in a limousine." Mallory smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Procedural revenge. Your father would have loved it. Keep the trust status dark," I instructed. "As far as Marla knows, I am just a broke woman running away to Texas to lick her wounds." "Done," Mallory said. "But be careful. Marla is not smart, but she is loud, and loud people control the narrative." I found out what she meant 2 hours later, somewhere on Interstate 10, heading east toward New Mexico. My phone, which I had finally reconnected to the network after scrubbing it for trackers, started buzzing incessantly. It wasn't calls, it was notifications. I pulled over at a rest stop near Benson, the heat radiating off the asphalt in shimmering waves. I opened my social media apps. Marla had gone nuclear. She had posted a long, tearful status update on Facebook and Instagram. It was a masterpiece of fiction. "It breaks my heart to finally have to practice tough love," she wrote. "My sister Brianna has been struggling with stability for years. We have tried to help her. Derek and I, we opened our home to her. We gave her money. But there comes a point where enabling becomes harmful. We had to ask her to leave for her own good, to help her find her own feet. Please pray for her. She is in a dark place, and we are just heartbroken." Beneath the post were hundreds of comments. "You are so strong, Marla," wrote my cousin Sarah, who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years. "Some people just don't want to be saved," commented one of Marla's country club friends. "Watch your wallet. She sounds unstable," added another. They were painting a portrait of me as a mentally unstable moocher. Marla was systematically destroying my reputation to ensure that if I ever did try to speak up, no one would believe me. She was isolating the victim. It was classic narcissistic abuse on a public stage. Then came the text from Derek. I stared at his name on my screen. My thumb hovered over the message. Part of me, the weak part that still remembered our wedding day, wanted him to apologize. I wanted him to say it was a mistake. I opened the message. "Brianna, please call me. You're spiraling. I know you're upset about the money, but you're imagining things. We moved it to a secure account because we were worried about your spending. You've been acting erratic lately. Just come back. We can talk about getting you some help." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound in the empty car. Gaslighting. Textbook. He was trying to create a paper trail. If he could show a judge these texts later, he could claim he was a concerned husband protecting our assets from a manic wife. He was not writing to me. He was writing to a future courtroom. Worried about my spending. I had bought 2 pairs of shoes in 3 years. He bought a new set of golf clubs last month that cost $2,000. I did not reply. Silence was my shield. Every word I said to them could be twisted. Every emotional outburst would be evidence of my instability. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and opened my laptop. If they wanted to play games with narratives, I would play with facts. Facts do not care about feelings. Facts do not have Facebook accounts. I created a new directory on my encrypted drive, Case File Roberts versus Monroe. I began to assemble the timeline. I imported the bank logs I had extracted in the motel room. I overlaid them with the security camera footage of Derek and Marla in the kitchen. Exhibit A, unauthorized transfer of funds. Timestamp: Tuesday, 3:12 in the morning. Location: Monroe residence, Scottsdale. Actor Derek Roberts, via Marla Monroe's device. I added the voicemail where Derek told me he loved me 4 hours before the theft. I tagged it Exhibit B, predatory intent. Then I added the screenshots of Marla's social media posts, Exhibit C, defamation and witness tampering. I worked with the precision of a forensic accountant. I did not just save files. I authenticated them. I ran checksums on the video files to prove they hadn't been altered. I pulled the metadata from the bank headers. I was building a weapon. Marla and Derek thought I was poor because I had no money in my pocket. They did not understand that in our world, information was the only currency that mattered, and I was printing money. I drove through the night. The desert turned into the flat. Endless plains of West Texas. By the time I reached the outskirts of Dallas, the sun was rising, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I checked into a corporate apartment that the Cipher Group had arranged for me. It was modern, gray, and soulless. It was perfect. I showered, washing the road dust and the feeling of Marla's house off my skin. I put on a crisp white shirt and black slacks. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was tired. Yes, she had dark circles under her eyes. But the softness was gone. The hesitation was gone. I sat down at the glass desk in the living room and connected to the secure line Mallory had set up for me. "I am in Dallas," I said when she answered. "Secure and operational." "Good." Mallory's voice was tight. "Because the timeline just accelerated." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" "I just received a digital packet from the board secretary," Mallory said. "Marla has called for an emergency vote on the Zephyr data sale. They aren't waiting for next week. They want to do it in 4 days. 4 days. I gripped the phone. That is not enough time for due diligence. That is illegal. They are bypassing due diligence by claiming exigent financial circumstances, Mallory explained. They are claiming the market is volatile, and if they don't sell now, the company collapses. It is a lie. Of course, the company is posting record profits, but the board is panicked, and Marla is whispering in their ears. "She can't authorize a sale without the voting trust," I said. "She knows that." "That is the twist, Brianna," Mallory said, her voice dropping an octave. "The packet lists the voting trust as present and consenting. The contact person listed for the trust is not you." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "Who is it?" "It is Marla," Mallory said. "She has submitted a sworn affidavit stating that you have verbally abdicated your responsibilities and granted her emergency proxy powers due to your personal crisis." I stared at the wall. She had forged my consent. She had lied to the Federal Securities Commission. She wasn't just bending the rules anymore. She was committing a felony that carried a 20-year prison sentence. "She is that confident," I whispered. "She thinks I am so broken, so poor, and so humiliated that I will never show up to challenge her." "If the vote goes through in 4 days," Mallory warned, "unwinding it will take years. The company will be gutted before a judge even looks at your file." "She wants a war," I said, my voice eerily calm. "She wants to sell the company that Dad built to buy more handbags and cover Derek's gambling debts." "What do you want to do?" "Brianna, I can file an injunction, but it will tip them off that you are fighting back." "No injunctions," I said. "Let them proceed. Let them think they have won. Let them set the table, light the candles, and pour the wine." "Brianna, I am not going to stop the meeting." "Mallory," I said, "I am going to attend it." "You need to be careful," Mallory said. "If you walk into that building, they will have security throw you out. Marla has already put your name on the do not admit list. I saw the memo." "I know," I said. I looked at the file on my screen. The Project Lattice folder that the mysterious hacker had tried to steal. "But they are looking for Brianna, the poor sister. They aren't looking for the owner, and they definitely aren't looking for the person who knows what is buried under the floorboards." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the Dallas skyline. It was a city of business, of money, of power. I fit right in. Marla called me poor because I didn't wear diamonds. She called me weak because I didn't scream. She was about to learn that the most dangerous thing in the room is not the person shouting orders. It is the person sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes, waiting for the exact moment to pull the pin. I had 4 days. 4 days to turn my evidence into an execution. 4 days to find out who the third hacker was. And 4 days to prepare for the family reunion from hell. I opened my laptop again. I didn't feel tired anymore. I felt electric. "Okay, Derek," I said to the empty room. "You want me to stop imagining things fine. Let's deal with reality." I typed a search query into my terminal, targeting the deep web chatter surrounding Zephyr Data Corp. If they were buying us, someone was talking, and if someone was talking, I would hear them. The hunt was on. The air conditioning in the corporate apartment in Dallas hummed with a sterile efficiency that matched my mood. I had been awake for 19 hours. The coffee in my mug was cold, but I kept drinking it because caffeine was the only fuel keeping my anger from burning me out completely. I had spent the last 6 hours dissecting Marla. Not the sister I grew up with, but the corporate entity she was trying to become, on one of my 3 monitors. I had pulled up the executive profile Marla had submitted to the board of Zephyr Data Corp as part of the acquisition diligence. It was a glossily produced PDF, full of buzzwords and high-resolution photos where Marla looked like a visionary leader rather than a woman who once called me because she did not know how to change the batteries in her television remote. I scrolled through the key achievements section. My jaw tightened. Led the strategic overhaul of the Monroe Sentinel encrypted server farm in 2021, resulting in a 40% increase in processing speed. I stared at the words, 2021. That was the year I spent 4 months living on caffeine and takeout, rewriting the kernel code for our data centers to patch a critical vulnerability. Marla had spent that entire summer in the Hamptons networking, which mostly involved drinking rosé and complaining about the humidity. She wasn't just stealing my money, she was stealing my work. She was wearing my intellect like a stolen coat, parading it around to convince these buyers that she knew what she was selling. You have no idea what you are claiming, Marla, I whispered to the screen. If they ask you one technical question, you will crumble. But that was the trick. She didn't intend to answer questions. She intended to sell the company before anyone asked them. A chime from my encrypted email client broke my concentration. I tabbed over. It was a message from an anonymous sender. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained no text. Just a single attachment, a grainy photograph, and a timestamp. I opened it. The photo was taken from a distance, likely with a telephoto lens or a high-end smartphone camera using digital zoom. It showed the dimly lit corner of a hotel bar. The decor was recognizable, the velvet lounge at the Ritz-Carlton in St. Louis, near our company headquarters. 2 people were huddled over a small round table. One was Marla. She was wearing a red dress that was too loud for a business meeting. Leaning in close, her hand resting on the forearm of the man across from her. The man was Wade Kessler. Wade was the acting chief financial officer of Monroe Sentinel. He was a weasel of a man with a comb-over that fooled no one and ambition that outstripped his talent. I had never trusted him. He had always looked at the company not as a service provider, but as a piggy bank waiting to be smashed open. I zoomed in on the table. There were no papers, no laptops, just 2 martinis and an intimacy that suggested this alliance went beyond the boardroom. They weren't negotiating, they were conspiring. The timestamp was from last night, 10:30 in the evening. So, Wade was the inside man. Marla couldn't navigate the financial complexities of a sale this size alone. She needed someone to cook the books, to make the numbers look attractive enough for a rush sale. Wade was helping her inflate the valuation so they could cash out fast. I saved the photo to my evidence drive. Exhibit D collusion. But why the rush? Why try to push the vote through in 4 days? Greed is usually patient if the payout is big enough. Panic is what makes people run. I went back to the emergency board packet I had intercepted. I had read the financial summaries, but I hadn't looked closely at the technical addendums. Lawyers and accountants usually gloss over those pages. Assuming the tech people have handled it, I scrolled down to page 86, Appendix C, System Integrity and Transfer Protocols. The text was dense, filled with legalese about intellectual property transfer and server handshakes, but then, buried in paragraph 4, subsection B, I found it. The final transfer of the proprietary source code and client encryption keys requires a Level 5 biometric authentication and a cryptographic signature from the designated systems architect to verify data integrity prior to the close of escrow. I froze. Level 5 authentication. There were only 2 people in the history of the company who had Level 5 clearance. One was my father, who was dead. The other was me. Marla didn't have it. Wade didn't have it. They could fire me. They could lock me out of the building. They could steal my bank account. but they could not replicate the cryptographic key that lived on a hardware token I kept in a safety deposit box or the biometric signature that lived in my fingerprints and retina. The buyers, Zephyr Data, weren't stupid. They knew they were buying a high-security firm. They had put this clause in to ensure they were actually getting the keys to the castle, not just the building. Without that signature, the sale couldn't close. The money wouldn't transfer. I sat back, a cold realization washing over me. This wasn't just about kicking me out. This was a setup. They needed me to sign, but they knew I would never agree to sell the company. So, their plan was to break me, to strip me of my home, my money, and my dignity, to make me so desperate, so financially insolvent, that I would crawl back to them. I could imagine the scene Marla had played out in her head. I would come begging for help. She would smile benevolently and say, "I can help you, Brianna, but I need you to sign this one little technical document so we can save the company. Do this, and I'll give you a small allowance." They wanted me to sign my own execution order. And then, once the sale was closed and the money was wired, they would discard me for good. "You need a key," I said, my voice hardening. "And you tried to crush the person holding it." It was a fatal miscalculation. You do not burn down the house of the person who holds the only fire extinguisher. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was an email notification from a legal service. "Service of Process Roberts. Roberts." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew it was coming, but seeing it in black and white was like taking a physical blow. I opened the document. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner Derek Andrew Roberts. Respondent Brianna Marie Roberts. I skipped the boilerplate legal language and went straight to the motions. Motion for temporary orders. 1. Petitioner requests exclusive use of the marital residence located in Scottsdale, Arizona. 2. Petitioner requests a freeze on all joint assets to prevent dissipation by the respondent, citing respondent's erratic behavior and history of financial mismanagement. 3. Petitioner requests spousal support in the amount of $5,000 per month, pending final division of assets. I stared at the screen, blinking rapidly. Financial mismanagement. He was the one who drained our accounts at 3 a.m. and spousal support. He wanted me to pay him. I read further. In his sworn statement, Derek claimed that I had abandoned the marital home without notice, causing him severe emotional distress. He claimed I had a secret gambling problem, a lie so bold it was almost impressive, and that he had secured the funds in a separate account solely to protect our future. He was painting himself as the long-suffering victim of a crazy wife. The rage flared hot and bright, but I forced it down. I pushed it into the cold, dark place where I kept my logic. This legal filing was a distraction. It was meant to keep me busy, to keep me fighting for scraps in family court while they sold the kingdom in the boardroom. "Nice try, Derek," I muttered, "but I'm not going to fight you for the furniture. I am coming for the whole building." I started to type a response to Mallory, instructing her to ignore the divorce filing for now. We had bigger fish to fry. Suddenly, my laptop screen flickered. The terminal window I had left open, the one monitoring the dark web chatter, pulsed red. A message appeared. It wasn't an email. It was a direct injection into my command line interface, the same intruder from the motel room, the ghost. I didn't touch the keyboard. I just watched. "Hello, Brianna?" They knew my name. "You are looking at the sale wrong," I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. "Who are you?" "A friend of the architecture, an enemy of the sale." The text scrolled up. "You think they are selling Monroe Sentinel for the client list? You think Zephyr Data wants the security contracts?" "Yes," I typed. "That is the business model." "No," the stranger replied. "Look at the server logs from Sector 7. Look at the data density. They aren't buying a security company. They are buying the archive. Sector 7. That was the legacy storage, old data. Why would anyone pay $450 million for archived data?" "They don't just want to sell the company," the message continued. "They want to sell what lies beneath the company." "What is beneath it?" I asked. The cursor blinked for a long time. Project Lattice was not a failure. It was a containment unit. And your sister is about to sell the key to the cage. The packet requires your signature because you are the only one who can unlock the encryption on the Lattice drive. If you sign that document, you don't just lose your legacy, you release the Lattice. Do not sign. Do not let them close. The connection severed. The terminal window went back to its idle prompt. I sat in the silence of the Dallas apartment, the hum of the city outside feeling miles away. Project Lattice. My father had told me it was a failed attempt at a predictive AI model for threat detection. He had told me they scrapped it because it was too invasive, too dangerous. He said he had buried the code. But if the hacker was right, Zephyr Data wasn't a tech conglomerate. They were an arms dealer buying a weapon, and Marla was too stupid to know what she was selling. She saw a $sign. She didn't see the bomb. But Wade knew. That was why he was huddled with her. That was why they were rushing. They weren't just committing fraud. They were trafficking in something dangerous. I looked at the divorce papers on one screen, the photo of the affair on the second, and the warning about Project Lattice on the third. The picture was complete. They had kicked me out to make me weak. They had stolen my money to make me desperate. They had filed for divorce to distract me, all to get me to hand over a weapon they didn't understand to a buyer who knew exactly how to use it. I stood up. I walked to the bedroom and pulled my suitcase out from under the bed. I wasn't just a scorned woman anymore. I wasn't just a shareholder protecting her investment. I was the firewall. I packed my bag. I had to go to St. Louis. I had to walk into the lion's den. Derek wanted a divorce. He was going to get one. But first, I was going to make sure that when he and Marla reached for the gold, all they grabbed was a live wire. I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Time to go home," I said. I grabbed my laptop. The game had changed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about containment. And I was the only one who knew how to lock the door. I sat in the corner of a quiet coffee shop in the suburbs of St. Louis, the city where my father had built his empire and where my sister was currently trying to dismantle it. The coffee in front of me was black, bitter, and cooling rapidly. I had arrived in the city 3 hours ago, driving a rental car paid for by my new signing bonus, staying off the grid, and waiting for the right moment to strike. But Marla, true to her nature, could not leave well enough alone. She had to poke the bear. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was the office of Marla Monroe. It was not a personal email. It was a formal cease and desist disguised as a family update. I opened it. Subject regarding the shareholder gala and family gatherings. Dear Brianna, in light of your recent unstable behavior and the unfortunate financial situation you have found yourself in, the family and the board believe it would be best if you did not attend the pre-vote gala this Friday evening. We want to avoid any scenes that might embarrass the legacy of Monroe Sentinel. Security has been instructed to deny entry to unauthorized personnel. We hope you take this time to reflect on your choices. Regards, Marla. I read it twice. She was uninviting me to a party celebrating the sale of a company I owned 51% of. She was treating me like a drunk cousin who might knock over the punch bowl, rather than the majority shareholder. I closed the email without replying. A reply would be emotional. I did not do emotional anymore. I stood up to go to the counter and buy a bottle of water. I pulled out my wallet and retrieved a small secondary credit card. It was an emergency card, one linked to a small trust account my mother had set up years ago. It had nothing to do with Derek or the joint accounts. It was supposed to be safe. I tapped the card on the reader, declined. The barista, a young woman with bright blue hair, looked at me apologetically. "I am sorry. It says card suspended by issuer." I stared at the little plastic rectangle. Marla. She had found the account, since she was the executor of my mother's estate. She technically had administrative oversight. Even if the money was mine, she had frozen it. She was systematically checking every cushion in the house, looking for any loose change I might have so she could starve me out. "It is fine," I said, handing the barista a $5 bill from my cash reserve. "Keep the change." I walked back to my table and opened my laptop. If she wanted to play dirty with finances, I would play dirty with information. I navigated to Marla's social media. She had been busy. 10 minutes ago, she had posted a photo. It was a selfie taken in the mirror of her foyer. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, and Derek was standing behind her, tying his tie. He looked hollow, but he was smiling that practiced, salesman smile. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to cut off the toxic people in your life so you can finally soar." It is hard to say goodbye to family, but when they refuse to grow up, you have to let them go. Here is to new beginnings and big deals. Boss Babe New Chapter Monroe. Legacy. The comments were a chorus of sycophants praising her bravery. I scrolled through them, my face expressionless. They were cheering for a thief. They were applauding a woman who had evicted her sister to fund a lifestyle she did not earn. But the photo gave me something else. In the reflection of the mirror, behind Derek, I could see his phone lying on the console table. The screen was lit up. He was careless. I switched tabs to my data collection tool. I had been mirroring Derek's text messages since I cracked his cloud password back in the motel. I scrolled back to yesterday, looking for the conversation that matched the timeline of the bank transfer. I found a thread between Derek and his brother, a man who lived in Ohio and borrowed money from us constantly. Derek, I feel sick about it. Mike, we took everything. She has $0 in her checking. Mike, you had to do it. Man, you said she was out of control. Derek, was she? I don't know. Marla said it was the only way to teach her a lesson. Marla said if Brianna had access to money, she would lawyer up and stop the sale. She told me the only way to get my payout is to break Brianna first. She called it a financial intervention. Mike, just listen to Marla. She knows business. Once the deal closes, you can give Brianna some cash back. Just write it out. Derek, yeah, I guess. She just looked so small when we closed the door. I highlighted the text. Marla said it was the only way. She told me the only way to get my payout is to break Brianna first. There it was. It wasn't an intervention. It wasn't about my instability. It was a calculated, predatory strike to prevent me from hiring legal counsel. It was conspiracy to commit fraud. Derek had just handed me the smoking gun, and he had done it while whining to his brother. I saved the conversation. Exhibit E, admission of malice. Suddenly, a red banner flashed across the top of my monitor, my custom security script. The one monitoring the Monroe Sentinel mainframe was screaming. Alert, unauthorized privilege escalation attempt. I typed in a command to isolate the source. Someone was trying to log into the central administrative console, not the employee portal, but the deep root system that controlled the server architecture. The username being attempted was R. Monroe Admin, my father's account. My father had been dead for 3 years. His account should have been deactivated, but Marla had kept it in the system for sentimental reasons, or so she claimed. In reality, she kept it because she thought it might still have higher clearance than hers. She was right, but she was also incredibly stupid. Attempting to access a corporate system using a deceased person's credentials to authorize a financial transaction was a felony. It was identity fraud. And since the system was tied to federal defense contracts, it was potentially a federal crime. I watched the logs. She was guessing passwords. Password attempt 1. Monroe 1980. Password attempt 2. Marla is the best password. Attempt 3 password 34. I almost laughed. She was trying to brute force a military-grade encryption with vanity passwords. But then, the system did something I didn't expect. After the third failed attempt, the log didn't just lock her out. It triggered a silent alarm. Protocol 001 activated. Hostile action confirmed. Initiating deadman switch. I froze. Protocol 001. I had seen references to it in the old documentation, but I thought it was a myth. My father had written code that I didn't know about. My phone rang. It was Mallory. Brianna. Her voice was breathless. What just happened? Marla tried to log in as Dad. I said, she triggered something. She triggered the hostile action clause, Mallory said. Your father left a specific instruction with the firm. He stipulated that if anyone other than you attempted to access his root directory while the voting trust was under duress, it would be classified as a hostile internal takeover. What does that mean? It means the seal is broken, Mallory said. There is a document box in my vault. It has been sitting there for 3 years with a digital lock that only opens if that specific server alarm is tripped. The lock just disengaged. What is inside it? I don't know, Mallory said. But the instructions say I have to courier it to the primary trustee immediately. I have a rider on a bike heading to the address you gave me in St. Louis. He will be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I looked around the coffee shop. Mallory, if Marla knows about this— She doesn't, Mallory assured me. The alarm is silent, on her screen. It just says, access denied. She thinks she just got the password wrong. She has no idea she just handed you the final piece of the puzzle. I hung up. I sat there for 20 agonizing minutes, watching the door, every time a customer walked in. I tensed. Was it Marla's security goons? Was it the police? Then, a bike messenger in a yellow jersey walked in. He looked around, checking a slip of paper. He spotted me, or rather, he spotted the red scarf I had told Mallory I would be wearing. He walked over. Delivery for Ms. Roberts. That is me, I said. He handed me a thick, heavy padded envelope. It was sealed with red wax tape. I signed for it, my hand shaking slightly. I waited until he left. Then, I gathered my things and walked out to my car. I couldn't open this in a coffee shop. I drove to a quiet park overlooking the Mississippi River. I parked in the back row, under the shade of an oak tree. I ripped open the envelope. Inside was a heavy iron USB drive, cold to the touch, and a letter on thick, cream-colored stationery. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was sharp, angular, and rushed. My father's hand. I unfolded the letter. My dearest Brianna, if you are reading this, I have failed to protect you from your sister. Or, perhaps, I have protected you perfectly by letting you see the truth. I knew this day would come. Marla has always loved the shine of the gold, but she never understood the weight of it. She sees the company as a piggy bank. You see it as a fortress. That is why I left the keys to you. But I knew she would try to take them. I knew she would try to push you out. I knew she would use my death to try and steal your life. So, I set a trap. The USB drive in this envelope contains the master encryption key for Project Lattice. It is not just a project, Brianna. It is the backbone. The company isn't the building. The company isn't the contracts. The company is the algorithm on this drive. Without this key, Monroe Sentinel is just an empty shell. If they sell the company without this key, the system will self-destruct within 24 hours of the transfer. It is a poison pill. If you are holding this, it means they have pushed you all the way to the edge. They have called you poor. They have called you weak. They have taken your money and locked you out of your home. Good. Let them think you are nothing, because now you hold the one thing that makes them everything. Use it, Brianna. Not for revenge, for justice. If you are being kicked out, it means it is finally time for you to walk in. Love, Dad. I put the letter down. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and fast, but I blinked them away. I held the USB drive in my hand. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon. Marla thought she had won because she had the house and the bank account. She thought she had won because she had blocked my credit card at a coffee shop, but my father had just reached out from the grave and handed me the detonator. I plugged the USB into my laptop. A single window popped up. Project Lattice Master Control. Status armed. Awaiting command. I looked at the screen. I could burn it all down right now. I could delete the code, crash the company, and leave Marla with nothing but lawsuits and debt. But that was too easy. That was emotional. I wanted them to sell. I wanted them to stand in that boardroom, sign the papers, pop the champagne, and think they had pulled off the heist of the century. And then, I wanted to walk in and show them that they had sold a box that they couldn't open. I closed the laptop. I started the car. Marla didn't want me at the gala. Too bad. I had just decided that I wasn't just going to attend the gala. I was going to be the main event. Okay, Dad, I whispered. Let's go walk in. The curtains in my hotel room were drawn tight against the afternoon sun of St. Louis. It was a generic suite, the kind designed for business travelers who spent more time in meetings than in bed. But it was secure. I had swept the room for bugs twice. Paranoia was no longer a symptom of stress. It was a job requirement. On the desk, the heavy iron USB drive sat next to my laptop like a dormant grenade. I had read the letter. Now, I had to watch the video. I plugged the drive into the side of my machine. The computer recognized the device instantly, bypassing the usual virus scans thanks to a root-level certificate embedded in the hardware. A single video file appeared in the directory. It was titled simply, "For the Quiet One." I clicked play. The screen filled with the image of my father's old study. The dark oak paneling, the smell of pipe tobacco that I could almost hallucinate just by looking at the image, and the wall of books behind him. My father sat in his leather chair. He looked thinner than I remembered, his skin possessing that translucent, papery quality that cancer bestows upon its victims in the final months. But his eyes were sharp, blue steel, just like mine. "Hello, Brianna?" the digital version of my father said. His voice was raspy but steady. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat feeling like a stone. "Hi, Dad?" I whispered to the empty room. "If you are watching this," he continued, leaning forward and clasping his hands on the desk, "then I am gone. And if I know your sister, she has probably already made her move. She has likely taken the house. She has likely taken the cash. She has probably made you feel small." He paused, and a sad, knowing smile touched his lips. "Marla was always the peacock," he said softly. "She needs the plumage. She needs the noise. She thinks power is something you wear, like a coat. She thinks wealth is something you spend. That is why I left her the money. Brianna, I left her the liquid assets, the properties, the cars. I gave her everything she wanted so she would not look for what she needed." He tapped the desk with a single finger. "I gave you the silence. I put the voting trust in your name, buried under layers of legal shell companies that lead back to a blind trust. Marla thinks she runs the company because she sits in the big office and cuts the ribbons. But you, Brianna, you own the company. You own 51% of the controlling Class A stock. You are the only person who can authorize a merger, a sale, or a dissolution." I sat back in my chair, the revelation washing over me. I had known I had the trust, but I had never understood the strategy behind it. I had spent years thinking my father gave Marla the money because he favored her boldness. I had lived in my modest rental, driving my dented car, thinking I was the runner-up. I was wrong. I wasn't the runner-up. I was the fail-safe. "I did not give you the cash because I knew you did not need it to define who you are," my father said, his eyes boring into the camera lens. "And I knew that if Marla knew you held the power, she would destroy you. She would envy you to death. So I let her think you were poor. I let the world think you were the struggling sister. Safety in obscurity. Brianna, it is the oldest trick in the security manual." He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made me wince. He took a sip of water and composed himself. "But now, she has pushed you out. That means she is trying to sell. She is trying to sell Monroe Sentinel because she has run out of cash and she needs a new injection of liquidity. She does not care about the mission. She does not care about the data. She only cares about the check." He leaned in closer. "Do not let her sell. Not because of the business, but because of what is inside the business. You have the key now. You are not poor. Brianna, you are the kingmaker. Now, go make a king, or slay one." The screen went black. I sat in the silence for a long time. The hum of the hotel refrigerator was the only sound. I was not poor. The realization was not a triumphant explosion. It was a slow, tectonic shift in my brain. The last 10 years of my life, the budgeting, the coupons, the way I let Derek handle the finances because I thought he was better at money stuff, it had all been a performance I didn't even know I was acting in. My father had encasing me in a chrysalis of perceived poverty to protect me from Marla's greed. Marla had the penthouse, I had the foundation. She had kicked me out because she thought I was a leech. In reality, she was a squatter in a house that I held the deed to. I picked up my phone and dialed Mallory. "I watched it," I said as soon as she picked up. "And," Mallory asked. "He knew," I said. "He set the whole thing up. The poverty was a cover story. I control 51% of the vote. I can walk into that board meeting on Friday and fire the entire executive suite with a single motion." "Technically, yes," Mallory said, her voice dropping into her professional, cautious register. "But legally, we are walking on a razor blade." "Why?" I asked. "I have the proof. I have the USB. I have the identity verification." "Because of the timeline," Mallory explained. "Marla has already filed the affidavit claiming you are mentally unstable. She has Derek's testimony. She has the financial insolvency argument. If you walk in there on Friday and reveal you are the secret majority shareholder, they will not just accept it, they will pivot." "Pivot to what?" "They will claim that your father's will was outdated," Mallory said. "They will claim that you manipulated the digital records because of your background in coding. Or, worst of all, they will use your sudden delusions of grandeur as proof that you are having a psychotic break. They will ask for an emergency injunction to place the voting trust under a court-appointed conservator. And guess who the court usually appoints?" "The next of kin," I said, my blood running cold. "Marla?" "Exactly," Mallory said. "If you reveal your hand too early, you give them the ammunition to strip you of the very power you just discovered. You cannot just be the owner, Brianna. You have to be the sane, stable, rational owner, and right now, the narrative they have built is that you are a broke, desperate woman who was just kicked out of her house." I stood up and paced the small room. "So I have to wait. I have to let them think they are winning until the very last second." "You have to let them commit the crime," Mallory corrected. "You have to let them initiate the vote. You have to let them put their names on the illegal sale. You have to let Marla and Wade Kessler incriminate themselves on the record. Only then, when the trap is snapped shut, do you step in. You don't stop the robbery. Brianna, you wait for them to walk out of the bank with the bag so you can catch them with the evidence. It is risky," I said. "If I miss the window by even 5 minutes, the sale closes. Once the digital handshake happens with Zephyr Data, unwinding it is impossible." "That is why you are the technical lead," Mallory said. "You know the system. You know exactly how much time you have." I hung up the phone. I went to the window and looked down at the street. St. Louis was busy, people rushing home from work, living their normal lives. They had no idea that a war was being fought in the invisible digital currents above their heads. I needed to clear my head. I needed to understand not just the what, but the who. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the file on the ghost, the anonymous texter who had warned me about Project Lattice. A friend of the architecture, they had called themselves. I looked at the syntax of their messages again. Sector 7, data density, containment unit. These weren't hacker terms, these were corporate terms. Sector 7 was an internal designation used in the blueprints of the Monroe server farm from 10 years ago. We had renamed it Archive Node Alpha 5 years back. Only someone who worked here a decade ago would still call it Sector 7. And containment unit, that was compliance language. That was the kind of sterile, dehumanizing language a risk assessment officer would use. I pulled up the employee manifest from 10 years ago. I filtered for the Compliance and Risk Management Department. There were 12 names. I crossed out the ones who had retired or moved to competitors. I crossed out the ones who were too young to have known my father well. I was left with 3 names. One was deceased. One was currently the VP of HR, a woman who was firmly in Marla's pocket. The third name was Elias Thorne. I stared at the name. Elias Thorne. He had been the chief compliance officer under my father. A quiet man. A man who wore suspenders and meticulously cleaned his glasses before reading any document. He had resigned abruptly 2 months after my father died. The official reason was health issues, but the rumor was that he had clashed with the new board. I opened a search on him. He had no LinkedIn, no Facebook. He had vanished into the analog world. But if he was the ghost, he hadn't vanished. He was watching. I opened the terminal window where the ghost had contacted me. "Are you Elias?" I typed. I waited. The cursor blinked. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then, text appeared. "Names are dangerous, but I am the one who cleaned his glasses." I exhaled, a sharp release of tension. It was him, Elias Thorne. The man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he was the one who had filed the paperwork for the graves. "Why are you helping me?" I typed. "Because your father was a good man." The reply came. "And because I know what Project Lattice does." I tried to stop it then. I was overruled. Marla does not know what she is selling. If Zephyr Data takes that drive offline and tries to decrypt it without the safety protocols, it won't just crash the company. What will it do? I asked. It will expose every backdoor into the national grid that your father was paid to patch but secretly monitored. It is not just data, Brianna. It is a map of the vulnerabilities of the entire Western Hemisphere. My hands hovered over the keyboard. My father hadn't just built a security company. He had built a surveillance state and then locked it in a box. Marla was about to sell the key to a foreign conglomerate for pocket money. "They are moving the vote." I typed. "Friday night." "I know," Elias replied. "I have a way into the building, but I cannot stop the vote. Only a shareholder can do that. I am the shareholder." I typed. "Then you need to walk into the fire," Elias wrote. "But be careful. They know you are in St. Louis. Wade Kessler has a private security team. They aren't police. They are cleaners. Let them come." I thought, but I typed, "I will be ready." "One more thing," Elias added. "Check the signature logs on the divorce filing. It wasn't signed by Derek." I frowned. I switched screens to the PDF of the divorce petition Derek had served me. I zoomed in on the signature line. Derek Andrew Roberts. It looked like his signature. It had the loop on the R and the jagged S. But then I looked at the digital timestamp metadata. The document was digitally signed at 9:45 in the morning on Wednesday. I checked my tracking data. At 9:45 on Wednesday, Derek was at a golf course. His phone GPS placed him on the 7th fairway. I had the location data. He wasn't near a computer. He wasn't signing legal documents. Marla had his digital signature on file. She had signed the divorce papers for him. She was so controlling, so obsessed with orchestrating this destruction, that she hadn't even trusted her accomplice to pull the trigger. She had done it herself. This wasn't just a divorce. It was forgery. I sat back. This was the crack in the armor. Derek was weak. But he wasn't the mastermind. Marla was driving the car, and she was driving it so fast she was missing the turns. I looked at the USB drive again. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "She is a peacock, all show, no substance." I had the weapon, I had the ally, and now I had the proof that my husband was just a puppet. I wasn't the poor sister anymore. I was the CEO in exile. And the exile was about to end. I closed the laptop. I had to get ready. I had to buy a dress, not a cheap one, not something from the rack. I needed armor. If I was going to walk into the gala and kill the king, I needed to look like a queen. But first, I had to survive the night. Elias was right. If they knew I was here, they would send someone. I went to the door and wedged the heavy desk chair under the handle. It was low-tech, but it worked. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, watching the gap under the door. I waited. Silence was my friend. Silence was where I lived, and in the silence, I prepared for war. The best revenge is not a scream. It is not a slap in the face. It is a paper trail. It is a timestamp. It is the cold, hard click of a digital lock snapping shut around someone who does not even know they are in a cage. I sat in my hotel room, the glow of the monitors painting my face in cool blue light. It was Tuesday morning. The vote was 3 days away. I picked up the phone and dialed Mallory. "It is time to flush the pipes," I said. "Are you sure?" Mallory asked. Once we initiate a formal audit request, the board goes into lockdown. If Marla has any sense, she will shred everything. Marla does not have sense, I replied, typing a command into my terminal. She has panic, and panic makes people sloppy. Submit the request. Mallory, use the data breach from Monday as the pretext. Tell them that a minority shareholder is concerned about the integrity of the data room due to detected external pings. Tell them that if they do not authorize an immediate, independent internal audit, the shareholder will file an injunction to halt the sale to Zephyr Data. They will agree, Mallory said, the smile audible in her voice. They are so desperate to close this deal that they will agree to anything that keeps the lawyers out of court. Exactly, I said. They will open the door to let the auditors in, and when they do, I will be waiting inside. 2 hours later, the notification came through. The board of Monroe Sentinel, in a frantic emergency session, had approved a rapid spectrum integrity scan to verify that no proprietary data had been stolen during the earlier intrusion. They hired an external firm to do it. What they did not know was that the external firm used a standard diagnostic toolkit that I had helped write 6 years ago, and I knew the back doors. As soon as the audit mode was activated on the server, the system went into a read-only state for most employees. But for administrators, it opened up specific maintenance channels. This was my moment. I did not just want to catch them selling the company, I wanted to catch them stealing. I needed proof of intent. I set up a honeypot. In cybersecurity, a honeypot is a trap. It is a system or a file that looks valuable, vulnerable, and unguarded. It exists solely to tempt an attacker. If you touch it, you leave a fingerprint that cannot be wiped. I created a new directory in the Secure Executive Drive. I named it Level 5 Override, Lattice Protocol Bypass. Inside, I placed a single file, Master Key Generator, exe, to Marla and Wade. This file would look like the Holy Grail. They knew they needed my signature to unlock the Lattice drive. They were panicking because I was gone. If they saw a file that promised to bypass my signature and generate a master key, they wouldn't be able to resist. They would think my father had left a back door for himself. But the file wasn't a key generator. It was a piece of forensic malware. As soon as someone executed it, it would record their IP address, their MAC address, the serial number of their processor, and crucially, it would silently activate the webcam of the device for 3 seconds to capture the face of the user. Then, it would send all that data to my secure server and self-delete, displaying a fake, corrupted file error message. I activated the trap at 4:15 in the afternoon. Then, I waited. I watched the server logs like a fisherman watching a bobber. 5 o'clock passed, 6 o'clock. At 7:32 in the evening, the line twitched. User login W. Kessler, CFO. Wade was online. He was accessing the system from inside the headquarters. I traced the connection. He was in the executive conference room. He navigated through the folders. He was moving fast, clicking through directories that he had no business being in. He bypassed the financial records. He went straight to the system architecture folders. He found the honeypot. I held my breath. "Come on, Wade," I whispered. "Be greedy." He hovered over the folder Level 5 Override. He paused for 45 seconds. He was probably talking to someone. Marla. Click. He opened the folder. Click. He executed the file. My screen exploded with data. Target acquired. Device Dell Latitude 9440. IP Internal Secure Node 4. User Wade Kessler. And then, the photo downloaded. It was grainy, taken from the upward angle of a laptop on a conference table, but it was perfect. Wade was sitting there, his tie loosened, his face sweaty and pale, and leaning over his shoulder, pointing at the screen with a manic intensity, was Marla. She was right there. She was actively participating in the attempt to bypass the security protocols of the company she claimed to lead. She wasn't just a beneficiary of the fraud. She was an accomplice to the cyber attack. The file crashed on their end. I saw the error log report. Error 404 key not found. In the photo, I saw Marla's mouth form a curse word. Wade slammed his hand on the table. They thought the file was broken. They had no idea they had just posed for their mugshots. I saved the packet, Exhibit F conspiracy to bypass federal security protocols. But I wasn't done. I had one more rat to catch. Derek. Derek wouldn't be looking for technical overrides. Derek didn't understand code. Derek cared about the narrative. He cared about proving I was crazy so he could keep the money he stole. I created a second honeypot. Specifically for him, I placed a file in my old personal HR folder, which I knew he still had access to through his spousal privilege account. I named the file B. Roberts, Psychiatric Evaluation, Confidential. It was a fake medical report. Inside, it detailed a fictional diagnosis of paranoid delusions and financial irresponsibility. It was exactly the lie he was trying to sell to the court. If he was a decent man, he would ignore it. If he was the man I had married, he would respect my privacy. But if he was the monster Marla had turned him into, he would steal it. At 8:45 in the evening, Derek logged in. He was at the house, my house. He went straight to my HR folder. He saw the file. He didn't just read it. He didn't just open it. He selected it. He clicked Share. He typed in an email address, Derek Roberts. Private Gmail.com. He emailed a confidential employee medical record, even a fake one, to an unsecured personal server. Violation of HIPAA. Violation of corporate data policy. Violation of the spousal non-disclosure agreement. The system logged the transfer. It logged the recipient. It logged the intent. Got you, I said softly. He wanted to use my mental health against me. He had just committed a federal privacy violation to do it. He had handed me the leverage to not only crush him in the divorce court, but to have him fired for cause without a penny of severance. I compiled the logs. I stamped them with the digital seal of the independent audit that was currently running. These weren't just my files anymore. They were part of the official audit record. They were immutable. I leaned back in my chair. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I had them. I had them all. My phone buzzed. It was a text message. Unknown number. Encrypted signal. The trap worked. I saw the traffic. It was the ghost. I typed back, "Who are you?" "Stop asking. Start moving." The reply came. "We need to meet. There are physical documents you need to see. Things that aren't on the server." Where I asked, "The parking garage of the Monolith. Level B4. Midnight. Come alone. And Brianna. Watch your 6. The Monolith." That was the nickname for the old Monroe Sentinel data center downtown, a brutalist concrete fortress that housed the original servers. It was mostly automated now, empty at night. I looked at the clock. 10:15 at night. I could stay here. I was safe here. I had the digital evidence. But the ghost mentioned physical documents, paper trails, signatures, the kind of things that Marla couldn't delete because she didn't know they existed. I changed my clothes. I put on dark jeans, black boots, and a heavy coat. I put the USB drive in my pocket. I put a small canister of pepper spray in the other pocket. I drove into the city. The streets were wet with a fresh rain, the lights of St. Louis blurring on the asphalt. The parking garage of the Monolith was a cavern of concrete and shadows. I drove down the spiraling ramp, level B1, B2, B3. Level B4 was the bottom. The air here was stale, smelling of oil and dust. The fluorescent lights hummed, flickering intermittently. It was empty, save for a few company vans parked in the far corner. I parked my rental car under a working light. I kept the engine running for a moment, scanning the shadows. I stepped out. The click of my boots echoed loudly. "Hello?" I called out. A shadow detached itself from a concrete pillar near the elevator bank. I gripped the pepper spray in my pocket. The figure stepped into the light. It was an older man. He wore a beige trench coat that had seen better days and a fedora that seemed like a relic from another era. He took off his hat. His hair was white, thinning, but his face was sharp, his eyes intelligent behind wire-rimmed glasses. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and began to clean the lenses. A nervous, habitual tick. It was Elias Thorne, the former chief compliance officer, the man who had disappeared. "You look like your father," Elias said. His voice was gravelly, echoing in the vast garage. "Elias," I said, exhaling, "you're the ghost." "Ghost is a dramatic term," he said, putting his glasses back on. "I prefer concerned observer." "You hacked my server," I said. "You tried to steal Project Lattice." "I tried to protect it," Elias corrected. He walked toward me, stopping a respectful distance away. He was holding a leather briefcase. I knew Marla was moving to sell. I knew if I didn't secure the archive, she would hand it over to people who would weaponize it. I was going to lock it down until you were ready. But you locked it down faster than I could. He smiled, a genuine expression of respect. "Your code is elegant, Brianna, better than your father's. Why are you here, Elias?" I asked. "Why come out of hiding now?" "Because of this," he said. He lifted the briefcase. "Digital logs are good, but judges like paper with ink on it." He placed the briefcase on the hood of my rental car and snapped the latches open. Inside were stacks of yellowed papers. "What is this?" "This," Elias said, tapping the top stack, "is the original risk assessment for Project Lattice, the one the board voted to bury. It proves that the system was deemed too dangerous for commercial use 7 years ago. If Zephyr Data sees this, they walk away. They can't buy a product that has been legally classified as a liability." He pulled out another file. "And this," he said, his voice hardening, "is the unredacted minutes from the board meeting where your father died. Marla wasn't just there, Brianna. She was the one who proposed the motion to strip his admin rights while he was in the hospital." I felt a surge of nausea. "She tried to lock him out while he was dying." "She tried," Elias said. "He stopped her. But this proves her pattern of behavior. It proves malice. It proves she has been planning a hostile takeover for years." He handed me the file. "You have the trap," Elias said. "You have the honeypot. Now you have the history. You can't just stop the sale, Brianna. With this, you can dismantle the board. You can burn the whole corrupt structure to the ground." I looked at the papers. This was the final nail. This was the context that turned their greed into a crime. "Why help me?" I asked again. "You could have sold this to Zephyr yourself." Elias looked around the dark garage. He looked tired. "I spent 30 years building the fence around this company," he said softly. "I won't let a couple of greedy children tear it down for a payout. Your father was my friend. And you are the only one who isn't trying to sell out." He closed the briefcase and handed it to me. "Go," he said. "The vote is Friday." "But they moved the venue." "What?" I looked up. "It is not at the HQ." "No," Elias said. "Marla got paranoid. She moved it to the St. Louis Vault, the old bank building downtown. It is strictly private. No press, no guests, just the board and the buyers." "She is trying to hide," I said. "She is trying to bury the body," Elias said. "Don't let her." Suddenly, tires screeched on the ramp above us. A black SUV with tinted windows came careening down the spiral, its headlights sweeping across the concrete walls. Elias's eyes widened. "They found us." "Go," I shouted. "I'll take the stairs," Elias said, moving with surprising speed for his age toward the fire exit. "Get out of here. Brianna, don't let them take that briefcase." I threw the briefcase into my passenger seat and scrambled into the driver's side. The SUV hit the bottom level and roared toward me. It wasn't a police car. It was private security. Wade's Cleaners. I slammed the car into gear. I didn't reverse. I floored it forward, aiming straight for the ramp. The SUV tried to block me, but I was smaller, faster. I swerved around a concrete pillar, my tires squealing, and shot past them. I hit the ramp doing 40 miles an hour. I didn't look back. I just drove. I had the evidence. I had the history. And now, I knew exactly where the final battle was going to happen. The St. Louis Vault. Marla thought she was safe behind thick walls and steel doors. She forgot one thing. I had the keys. All of them. The adrenaline from the parking garage escape had burned off. leaving behind a cold, crystalline focus. I had not returned to the hotel. That location was compromised. Instead, I had driven to a short-term rental on the north side of St. Louis, a neighborhood where the streetlights were broken and people did not ask questions about a woman checking in at 2 a.m. with a briefcase full of stolen corporate secrets. I sat on the floor of the unfurnished living room, surrounded by the documents Elias Thorne had given me. My laptop hummed in the center of the paper circle, casting a pale blue light on the yellowed pages. Elias had been right. The sale to Zephyr Data was not a business transaction. It was a laundering operation. I picked up a memo dated 7 years ago. It was stamped Eyes Only. The subject line was Project Lattice Commercial Viability versus Liability. The text was chilling. The Lattice algorithm does not distinguish between authorized stress testing and active infrastructure dismantling. In its current state, it acts as a universal skeleton key for any SCADA system built before 2010. Sale or transfer of this code without Department of Defense clearance constitutes a violation of the International Traffic in Arms regulations. I leaned back against the peeling wallpaper. My father had built a weapon. He had realized it, panicked, and buried it. Now, Marla and Wade were digging it up. But here was the catch. Buried in the fine print of the proposed sale agreement I had hacked from Wade's server. Zephyr Data knew about the liability. They had inserted a clause requiring a technical integrity warrant to be signed by the system architect. That signature would legally reclassify the code from weapon to security diagnostic tool. It was a lie, a legal fiction to bypass the arms regulations. If I signed, I wouldn't just be selling the company, I would be lying to the federal government. I would be taking the fall if the weapon was ever used. Marla and Wade would walk away with the money, and when the FBI eventually knocked on the door, my name would be the only one on the technical warrant. They wanted to frame me for treason. "You don't just want me broke, Marla," I whispered. "You want me in federal prison." My laptop chimed, a proximity alert. I crawled to the window and peered through the slats of the cheap plastic blinds. The street below was empty, save for a stray cat picking through a tipped garbage can, but then I saw it, parked 3 houses down, facing the wrong way on a one-way street, was a gray sedan. It was nondescript, the kind of car you rent at the airport, but on the dashboard, a small green light pulsed rhythmically, a signal scanner. They were sweeping for my devices. They knew I was in the area. I grabbed my phone and checked the remote feed for the corporate apartment in Dallas, the one I had left 24 hours ago. The feed was black. The cameras had been disabled. I switched to the backup audio sensor I had hidden in the Dallas air vent. I heard heavy footsteps, wood splintering, men's voices speaking a language that sounded Eastern European. "Clear," a voice said. "She is not here. The laptop is gone." "Find her," another voice commanded. "The deal closes in 48 hours. We need the key." I cut the feed. They were hunting me. Not private investigators, not divorce lawyers. Wade had hired professionals. These were the kind of men who made problems disappear. My phone rang in my hand. The screen lit up with a photo I hadn't changed in 5 years. Marla, smiling, holding a glass of champagne. I stared at it. Why was she calling me at 3 a.m? I pressed record on my backup drive, then swiped to answer. "Hello, Marla," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the fear that was currently trying to strangle my heart. "Brianna." Marla's voice was breathless, pitched high in a tone of frantic concern. "Oh, thank God. I have been so worried. Derek told me you ran off. We have been trying to find you." "I am sure you have," I said, looking at the gray sedan outside. "Your friends are parked outside." I don't know what you're talking about," Marla lied. The tremble in her voice was manufactured. It was a performance. "Listen, Brianna, we need to talk. I think things have gotten out of hand. I want to apologize." I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to fill it. "I know I was harsh," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But I was just trying to protect the legacy. Derek has been pushing for the divorce, But I told him we are family first. I want you to come home. Come to the meeting. We can work this out. I can set up a trust fund for you. You won't ever have to worry about money again." "A trust fund," I repeated flatly. "Yes, a huge one. $2 million a year," she said, the number rolling off her tongue like bait. "All you have to do is come in and sign a few technical forms to close out Dad's old projects. Just a formality. Then we can put all this ugliness behind us." "You are recording this call, aren't you, Marla?" I asked. "What?" "No. Why would I?" "You want me to sound unstable," I said, cutting her off. "You want me to scream at you. You want me to threaten you so you can play it for the judge and get your emergency injunction. Or you want me to agree to sign the warrant so you can hand me over to Zephyr." There was a pause. The mask slipped. "You are in over your head, Brianna," Marla hissed, her voice dropping the sweet act. "You are playing with people who don't care about your little computer tricks. Wade is losing patience. Tell Wade that if he sends another car to scan my signal, I will release the audit logs to the Securities and Exchange Commission before breakfast," I said. "You wouldn't dare," Marla snapped. "You would tank the stock value. You would lose everything too." "I have nothing to lose. Marla, you took my house. You took my money. You took my husband. All I have left is the truth, and the truth is very, very heavy." "You are a bitch," she spat. "And you are a thief," I replied. "I will see you at the meeting." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. She was so transparent. She thought she could buy me off with $2 million of my own money. She thought I was stupid enough to walk into a trap because she used the word family. I immediately received a text from Mallory. "Urgent. Call me." I dialed her back on the secure line. "They moved the meeting," Mallory said, her voice tight. "They didn't just move the venue, they moved the time." "When?" "Tomorrow morning," Mallory said. 9 o'clock? They sent out an emergency amendment to the agenda 10 minutes ago. They are claiming market volatility requires an immediate close. They are trying to outrun me, I said. They know I have Elias's files. They know I am in St. Louis. They want to sign the papers before I can physically get into the room. It gets worse, Mallory said. I just got an alert from the court docket. Derek filed an emergency ex parte motion for a temporary conservatorship over your assets. On what grounds? He submitted a sworn affidavit claiming you have been sending him threatening messages and that you are suffering from paranoid schizophrenia aimed at financial sabotage. He attached a heavily edited audio file probably from the call you just had with Marla. They doctored the call that fast. They are desperate. Brianna, the hearing is set for 8:30 in the morning. Half an hour before the board meeting, I paced the small room. It was a pincer movement. While Marla closed the sale at 9, Derek would be in court at 8:30 stripping me of my legal right to vote. If the judge signed that order, my 51% stake would be frozen, and Marla, as the next of kin, would be granted temporary proxy power. She would vote my shares to sell the company. Can you stop the hearing? I asked. Not without you present, Mallory said. And if you go to the courthouse to fight Derek, you will miss the board meeting. You can't be in two places at once. I closed my eyes. They had thought of everything. They knew I would try to crash the meeting, so they used the court to pin me down. If I ignored the court, I would lose the legal standing. If I went to court, I would lose the tactical window. I am not going to the courthouse, I said. Brianna, if you don't show, the judge will grant the order by default. You will lose the company. No, I said, a plan forming in the cold logic of my mind. I won't. Send the evidence I gathered to the judge's clerk, the audit logs, the text messages where Derek admits to the theft, the proof that he shared fake medical records, file a counter motion for perjury. That might delay it, but it won't stop the hearing, Mallory warned. I don't need to stop it, I said. I just need Derek to be too busy to testify. What do you mean? Derek is a coward. Mallory, he is doing this because he thinks he is safe. He thinks he is the victim. I am going to remind him that he is a criminal. I hung up. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the honeypot data I had collected on Derek, the HIPAA violation, the theft of funds. I drafted an email, not to the court, to Derek. Subject: the price of perjury. Derek, I know about the hearing at 8:30. I know about the affidavit. Attached is a file containing the logs of your unauthorized bank transfer at 3:12 in the morning. Also attached is the proof that you emailed a fake medical record to your personal account. A federal violation of privacy laws. If you step into that courtroom tomorrow, this file goes to the district attorney. You won't just lose the divorce, you will go to jail for fraud and perjury. However, if you happen to get sick and cannot attend the hearing, the judge will have to postpone. And by the time the court reconvenes, the board meeting will be over. Look at the attachment. Derek, ask yourself if Marla is worth 5 years in a federal penitentiary. You have 1 hour to withdraw the motion. I hit send. I watched the tracking pixel. He opened the email 3 minutes later. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Derek. You are bluffing. I typed back. Try me. I have nothing left to lose. Do you? 2 minutes later, Mallory called back. You won't believe this, she said. Derek's lawyer just called the clerk. He is withdrawing the emergency motion. He claims his client has come down with a sudden and severe viral infection and cannot appear. I exhaled, my shoulders dropping. He folded. He is terrified of you, Mallory said. But Brianna, that only buys you the legal standing. You still have to get into the St. Louis vault. Marla has private security. Wade has mercenaries. You are one woman with a laptop. I am not just one woman, I said, looking at the briefcase full of papers. I am the majority shareholder, and I am done hiding. I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the morning. The meeting was in 5 hours. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the Brianna who clipped coupons. She wasn't the Brianna who let her sister bully her. She was the daughter of the man who built the system. I went back to the living room. I took the USB drive, the key, and hung it on a chain around my neck, tucking it under my shirt. I packed the physical evidence into the briefcase. I checked the window one last time. The gray sedan was still there. They thought they had me trapped. They thought they were the hunters. I went to the back door of the rental unit. It opened into a narrow, garbage-strewn alley. I slipped out into the cool night air. I didn't take my rental car. They would be tracking it. I walked 2 blocks east, keeping to the shadows, until I found a line of electric scooters parked on the corner. I scanned the app. I put on my hood. I rode through the sleeping city, the wind biting at my face. I headed toward the St. Louis vault. It was a fortress of limestone and granite. A bank turned into a secure meeting facility. I stopped a block away, watching the entrance. Black SUVs were already lining up. Men in suits with earpieces were patrolling the perimeter. It looked less like a board meeting and more like a mafia summit. I checked my watch. 6 in the morning, 3 hours until the vote. I wasn't going to knock on the front door. I pulled up the blueprints of the vault on my phone. Blueprints I had memorized when my father was retrofitting the server room in the basement. There was a service entrance for the HVAC systems. It was located in the loading dock, behind a steel gate that required a biometric scan. Marla had updated the front door security. She had hired guards, but she had forgotten that the building's nervous system, the heating, cooling, and ventilation was still controlled by the legacy Monroe automated grid, and I was the admin. I tapped a command on my phone. A block away, the heavy steel gate of the loading dock clicked and slowly began to roll up. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. You changed the locks, Marla, I whispered. But you forgot who built the house. I moved toward the opening. The sun was just beginning to crest over the Mississippi River, painting the sky in colors of blood and gold. They wanted a sale. They were about to get a reckoning. I stepped into the darkness of the loading dock, and behind me, I hit the command to close the gate. It slammed shut with a final, echoing crash that sounded like a gunshot. The elevator doors to the penthouse floor of the St. Louis vault slid open with a soft, expensive chime. I stepped out onto the plush carpet of the executive lobby. I was not wearing a power suit. I was wearing dark jeans, heavy boots scuffed from the escape in the parking garage, and a plain black sweater. My hair was pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense knot. I carried nothing but the battered leather briefcase Elias Thorne had given me and the small iron USB drive hanging around my neck. 2 security guards in dark suits stepped forward immediately, their hands raising in a gesture that was half warning, half barrier. "Ma'am, this floor is restricted," the taller one said. "Private session." I did not stop walking. I did not slow down. I looked him directly in the eyes. "I am a Class A shareholder of Monroe Sentinel," I said, my voice low and devoid of any tremor. "If you touch me, I will have you charged with assault and battery before you can blink, and if you attempt to impede a shareholder from a board vote, you will be personally liable for securities fraud." The guard hesitated. He looked at the determination in my eyes, then at the confident stride of the woman beside me. Mallory Vance had met me in the lobby downstairs. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored suit, holding a legal binder like a shield. "She is with me," Mallory said, flashing her Bar Association credentials. "Counsel for the trust. Move." The guards exchanged a look. They were paid to stop intruders, not lawyers. They stepped aside. I pushed open the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. The room was vast, dominated by a 30-foot table made of polished black walnut. At the far end, framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Mississippi River, sat Marla. She was laughing, holding a crystal water glass, flanked by Wade Kessler and a group of men in gray suits, the representatives from Zephyr Data. The sound of the doors slamming shut against the stops silenced the room instantly. Marla's head snapped up. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. It was the look of a ghost seeing its murderer. "What are you doing here?" Marla shrieked. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over backward with a loud crash. "Security? I said no admittance. Get her out of here." The Zephyr executives looked around, confused. The lead negotiator, a man with silver hair and a shark smile, frowned. "Ms. Monroe, who is this?" I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, the foot of the table, directly facing Marla. I pulled it out and sat down. I placed the briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. "I am Brianna Roberts," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. "And we need to talk about the price." "She is trespassing," Marla yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is mentally unstable, Wade. Call the police. Get her out." Wade Kessler stood up, his face pale. "Brianna, you need to leave. This is a closed meeting. You have no standing here." Mallory stepped forward and slammed a thick stack of documents onto the center of the table. "Actually," Mallory said, her voice cutting through the panic, "Mrs. Roberts has every right to be here. She is a named beneficiary of the Monroe Family Trust, and under the corporate bylaws, any beneficiary has the right to observe a sale of the majority assets. If you remove her, this entire proceeding becomes illegal and void." The Zephyr rep looked at Marla. "Is this true?" Marla stammered. She has a small interest, but she is insolvent. She has no voting power. She is just here to cause a scene because her husband left her." I didn't look at Marla. I looked at the Zephyr executives. "You are about to wire $450 million to this woman," I said calmly. "Before you do, you might want to know what you are actually buying." "We have done our due diligence," the Zephyr rep said dismissively. "You did due diligence on the books Wade Kessler cooked," I said. "You didn't do due diligence on the people." I opened the briefcase. I took out a single folder. "Marla calls me poor," I said, opening the file. "She calls me a charity case, but interestingly, the only person stealing money from this company is her." I slid the first document down the table. It was the log from the honeypot trap, the photo of Marla and Wade leaning over the laptop, trying to hack the system. "Exhibit A," I said. "Attempted unauthorized access of a Level 5 security node. timestamped yesterday evening. That is your CEO and your CFO trying to bypass federal encryption protocols using a malware file they thought was a key generator. Wade's eyes bulged. He recognized the photo. He recognized the moment. "This is fake," Wade sputtered. "This is a deep fake. She is good with computers. She fabricated this." "The metadata is verified by an independent auditor," I countered, sliding the next sheet. "An auditor approved by this very board 48 hours ago. You walked right into the trap, Wade." I kept going. I was relentless. I was a machine. "Exhibit B?" I said. "Bank transfer logs. My husband, Derek Roberts, transferring $35,000 from our joint account to a holding company controlled by Marla Monroe. The memo line, consulting fees. Tell me, Marla, what consulting did my husband do at 3 a.m. from your kitchen?" Marla's face was turning a blotchy red. "He was helping me with logistics." "He was helping you frame me for insolvency," I said. "Exhibit C? A sworn affidavit Derek signed yesterday claiming I was mentally unstable. And here," I slammed down the email printout, "is the email where he admits to his brother that he only did it because you told him it was the only way to get paid." The room was deadly silent. The Zephyr executives were reading the papers, their expressions shifting from annoyance to concern. "This is a family dispute," Wade said, his voice desperate. "Gentlemen, please, this woman is going through a messy divorce. She is lashing out. She is trying to torpedo the sale because she is bitter that she was cut out of the will. It is tragic, really, but it has no bearing on the asset value." Wade turned to me, his eyes cold and predatory. "Brianna," he said, using a soft, condescending tone. "Look at you. You are wearing dirty boots. You look like you haven't slept in days. You are spiraling. We understand you are hurt, but this is business. You are embarrassing your father's memory." That was the mistake. He brought up my father. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the executioner raising the axe. "You want to talk about my father?" I asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the iron USB drive. I held it up. The light from the chandelier caught the dull metal. "You all think you are buying a security company," I said to the Zephyr team. "But Wade knows better. Wade isn't selling you a company. He is selling you Project Lattice." The color drained from Wade's face so fast, he looked like a corpse. "That is a myth," Wade whispered. "A ghost story." "Is it?" I plugged the USB into the secure port of the conference table's main terminal. The giant screen on the wall flickered to life. The Zephyr logo disappeared. In its place, the Monroe Sentinel crest appeared, followed by a red banner, restricted clearance, eyes only. "This drive contains the source code," I said. "And it also contains a message from the founder, the man you are all trying so hard to ignore." I clicked play. My father's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his study, looking at the camera with that intense, piercing gaze. "If you are watching this," my father's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, "then the board has lost its way. I built this company to protect data, not to weaponize it, but I knew there were wolves at the door. I knew that one day, greed would outweigh duty." Marla stared at the screen, her mouth open. She hadn't seen this. She didn't know it existed. "Marla," my father said on the video. Marla flinched as if he had slapped her. "I know you are watching this. I know you are the one leading the charge to sell. You always wanted the lifestyle, but you never wanted the responsibility. You think you own this company because you sit in my chair. You think power is something you inherit." The video version of my father leaned forward. "But I knew you would try to sell Project Lattice. I knew you would endanger national security for a payout. So, I made a choice. I split the legacy. I gave the money to the person who wanted to spend it, and I gave the power to the person who would protect it." The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The Zephyr lead leaned forward, mesmerized. "I created a voting trust," my father continued. "A single, controlling entity that holds 51% of the Class A stock. This trust supersedes the board. It supersedes the CEO. No sale can happen without the signature of the trustee." Marla stood up, trembling. Turn it off. This is fake. He was senile when he made this. Sit down. Marla, I shouted, my voice cracking like a whip. She sat, on the screen. My father took a breath. You all think you know who owns this company, he said. You think it is the board? You think it is Marla? But the true owner, the person with the absolute right to hire, fire, and liquidate, is... I hit the space bar. The video froze. My father's face was paused on the screen, his mouth open, about to form a name. I looked around the room. Wade was sweating profusely. Marla was shaking. The Zephyr executives were looking at me with a new, dawning realization. You want to know whose name he is about to say? I asked softly. I stood up and walked to the head of the table. I stood right next to Marla. She shrank away from me, terrified. You kicked me out of my house because you thought I was poor, I said to her. You tried to destroy my reputation because you thought I was weak. You tried to steal my husband because you thought I was alone. I looked at Wade. You called me unstable. You called me a liability. I turned to the Zephyr executives. You have a contract in front of you, I said. It requires a signature from the majority shareholder. Marla has signed it. Wade has signed it. I picked up the contract. I looked at the signature line. But this signature is worthless, I said. Because Marla doesn't own this company. She is just the tenant. Who owns it then? The Zephyr rep asked. His voice hushed. I looked him in the eye. Play the rest of the video, I said to Mallory. Mallory nodded and hit the key. The video resumed. My father looked into the lens, and for a second, it felt like he was looking right at me, across time and death. Is Brianna, my father said. The trust belongs to Brianna Marie Roberts. She is the majority shareholder, she is the owner, and she is the only one I trust to do what is right. The video ended. The screen went black. Marla let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. I looked at the stunned faces around the table. I am not here to observe, I said, my voice steel. I am here to vote. I reached into the briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the one Mallory had prepared. The one with the clause I had been waiting 10 years to invoke. I am invoking Article 10 of the Corporate Charter, I said. Immediate dissolution of the board due to gross negligence and criminal conspiracy. I looked at Marla. She was small. She was broken. She was exactly what she had accused me of being. Get out of my chair, Marla, I said. And then I waited. The room held its breath. The king was dead. Long live the queen. The room was so quiet that I could hear the hum of the hard drive spinning down on the table. The image of my father had faded to black, but his words were still hanging in the air like smoke. Marla was still standing, her hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table so hard that her knuckles were white. She looked at the blank screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Her brain was trying to process a reality that contradicted her entire existence. In her world, money was loud, power was visible. The idea that the sister she had mocked for wearing sale rack cardigans held the keys to her kingdom was simply computing as an error. This is a lie, Marla whispered. Her voice was thin, stripped of its usual bravado. Daddy would never do that. He loved me. I was the face of this company. You were the face, I said, my voice steady and cold. But he knew you should never be the brain. I looked at Mallory. She nodded and opened the final section of the legal binder she had slammed onto the table earlier. She flipped it open to the very last page, a document on heavy, watermarked paper with a gold seal embossed at the bottom. This is the certification of the voting trust, Mallory announced, sliding the document toward the center of the table, where the Zephyr Data executives could see it. It was triggered automatically the moment Marla Monroe attempted to access the root directory using a deceased administrator's credentials. That action was classified as a hostile internal event, which unsealed the trust. The lead negotiator for Zephyr Data, the silver-haired shark, reached out and picked up the document. He put on a pair of reading glasses. He read in silence for a long minute, Marla watched him, her eyes wide and terrified. Wade Kessler was wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that was already soaked. The Zephyr executive looked up. He took off his glasses and placed them on the table. He looked at Wade, then at Marla. His expression was one of absolute disgust. This document confirms that 51% of the Class A voting stock is held in an irrevocable trust. The executive said, "The sole trustee is Brianna Marie Roberts. It also confirms that the bank holding the shares has locked the portfolio against any transfer not physically signed by Mrs. Roberts." He turned to Wade. "You told us the board had a unanimous consensus. You told us the Monroe family was united in the sale." "We are," Wade stammered. "Brianna is she is a minority interest. We can override her. We have the board majority." "You do not seem to understand how math works, Mr. Kessler," I said. 51% is not a minority. It is the whole game. The board serves at the pleasure of the shareholders. And as of right now, the majority shareholder is very displeased. I stood up and walked over to the whiteboard behind Marla's chair. I picked up a marker. "The sale to Zephyr Data is dead," I said. "I am formally voting my shares against the acquisition. The motion fails." The Zephyr executive stood up. He signaled to his team. They began packing their laptops and papers immediately. "We are done here," the executive said. "Zephyr Data does not do business with fraudulent entities. We will be reviewing our legal options regarding the time and resources we wasted on this due diligence." "Wait," Marla screamed. She ran around the table, grabbing the executive's arm. "You can't leave. We have a deal. I promised you the Lattice protocols. I can still get them. I just need time." The executive pulled his arm away from her as if she were contagious. "Ms. Monroe, if you try to sell those protocols again, I will personally call the Department of Defense. You are lucky we are just walking away and not calling the FBI." The Zephyr team walked out. The heavy double doors swung shut behind them with a finality that echoed like a tomb door closing. Now, it was just us. The board, Wade, Marla, and me. Marla turned slowly to face me. Her face was a mask of panic and rage. "What have you done?" she shrieked. "You ruined it. You ruined everything. That was $450 million. Brianna, do you know what you just threw away?" "I threw away a crime scene," I said. I returned to my seat and pulled the stack of audit logs from my briefcase. "We are not done," I said. "The sale is canceled. Now we deal with the housekeeping." I looked at the other board members, 6 men and women who had sat silently through the entire exchange, hoping to remain invisible. "You all have a choice," I said. "You can go down with the ship, or you can help me clean up the wreckage. I am calling for an immediate motion to terminate the employment of Wade Kessler for cause." "On what grounds?" Wade shouted. "I am the acting CFO." "On the grounds of corporate espionage and attempted data theft," I said, holding up the photo of him and Marla at the laptop. "This audit log proves you tried to bypass a federal security lock. That is a felony. I also have evidence that you conspired to falsify the valuation of the company by hiding the liability of Project Lattice." I looked at the board secretary. "I want it noted in the minutes. Motion to terminate Wade Kessler, effective immediately, and to strip him of all severance packages pending a criminal investigation." The board members looked at each other. They looked at Wade, who was trembling. They looked at me, the woman holding 51% of the vote. "Seconded," the board chairman said quietly. "All in favor?" I asked. Every hand went up, except Marla's. "You are fired." "Wade," I said. "Security will escort you out. If you try to access any device, you will be arrested." Wade didn't argue. He didn't fight. He just slumped. A man whose ambition had finally collapsed under the weight of his own incompetence. 2 guards stepped forward and marched him out. Marla watched him go. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked wild, cornered. "You can't fire me," she hissed. "I am a Monroe. My name is on the building." "Your name is on the building," I agreed. "But your fingerprints are on the crime." I slid the final file across the table. It was the file containing the evidence against Derek, the bank transfers, the fake medical records, and the emails between Derek and Marla where she instructed him to starve me out. "I am not firing you, Marla," I said. "Not yet. First, I am placing you on indefinite administrative leave pending an internal investigation into your role in the conspiracy to defraud a shareholder." "Conspiracy," Marla laughed, a high, brittle sound. "I am your sister. I was trying to help you." "You stole $35,000 from my bank account," I said. "You instructed my husband to perjure himself in family court. You forged my signature on a divorce petition, and you tried to sell a restricted weapon to a foreign entity." I leaned forward. "That is not helping. That is racketeering." Marla looked at the board members. "Are you going to let her do this? She is crazy. She is the unstable one. Look at her clothes. She looks like a homeless person." The chairman cleared his throat. He wouldn't meet Marla's eyes. "The evidence is quite compelling. Marla, we have to follow protocol. The motion for administrative leave carries." Marla stood alone in the center of the room. The power she had worn like a coat had been stripped away, leaving her shivering and small. She had lost the company. She had lost the money. She had lost her allies. She looked at me with pure, distilled hatred. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you hide it? Why did you let me think you were poor? Why did you walk around in those cheap clothes and drive that piece of junk car if you owned it all? You tricked me." I stood up. I picked up my briefcase. I felt lighter than I had in years. "I didn't trick you, Marla," I said. "I just didn't correct you." I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of her. She flinched, expecting me to scream, to hit her, to do something dramatic. But I was calm. I was the eye of the storm. "You want to know the truth?" I asked softly. "You didn't kick me out because I was poor. That was just the excuse." I looked her up and down, taking in the designer dress, the expensive jewelry, the desperate need for validation that radiated off her like heat. "You kicked me out because you couldn't stand the fact that I had everything without needing to show it off," I said. "You hated that I was content. You hated that I didn't need your approval. And deep down, you knew that the only thing you really owned was the noise." Marla opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The truth had finally hit the target. She wasn't angry anymore. She was broken. I turned my back on her. "Goodbye, Marla," I said. "I will have my lawyers send over the eviction notice for the house. It belongs to the trust, remember? And since you are no longer an officer of the company, you no longer qualify for corporate housing." I walked toward the double doors. I didn't look back at the board members who were frantically taking notes. I didn't look back at my sister, who was sinking into the chair I had ordered her out of. I pushed the doors open and stepped out into the hallway. Mallory was waiting for me. She fell into step beside me as we walked toward the elevator. "That was brutal," Mallory said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Procedurally perfect, but brutal." "It was necessary," I said. "What now?" Mallory asked as we stepped into the elevator. "Do you want to go celebrate champagne a press conference?" I looked at my reflection in the polished metal of the elevator doors. I saw the tiredness around my eyes, but I also saw the steel. "No," I said. "I want to go to the server room. I need to purge Wade's accounts and secure the Lattice drive. Then, I want to go to a diner and have a burger. A cheap one," Mallory laughed. "You just saved $1 billion company and crushed a hostile takeover. You can afford a steak." "I can afford anything I want," I said as the doors opened to the lobby. "That is the point. I just choose not to need it." I walked out of the building into the bright morning sun of St. Louis. The air was crisp. The city was waking up. I checked my phone. I had missed calls from Derek. He must have heard the news. He probably realized that his viral infection wasn't going to save him from the storm that was coming for him. I blocked his number. I wasn't Brianna the poor sister anymore. I wasn't Brianna the victim. I was Brianna Roberts, owner, architect, survivor. I walked down the street, my boots clicking on the pavement. I didn't look back at the tower. I didn't need to. I knew who owned it, and for the first time in my life, the silence wasn't empty, it was full. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let me know your location and your thoughts on Brianna's revenge. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Stay tuned for the next drama.